Everyone saw the woman cleaning the floors, but nobody realized she would soon become the only person capable of saving the most powerful man's greatest treasure. The waves of Silver Cove looked peaceful that afternoon. Golden sunlight reflected across the private beach of the luxury resort, turning the ocean into a mirror of light. Expensive cars lined the entrance. Guests wearing designer clothes laughed beneath white umbrellas. Servers carried crystal glasses while security guards watched every movement. It was a world built on wealth. A world where names mattered. Where status opened doors. And where some people were noticed, while others were invisible. Among the crowd moving through the resort was Naomi Brooks. She pushed a small cleaning cart across the marble floors near the beach lounge, quietly wiping away the traces left behind by people who never looked back. Footsteps passed her. Conversations continued around her. Nobody stopped. Nobody asked her name. To most guests at Silver Cove, she was simply another employee in a uniform. A person who cleaned the messes others left behind. Cleaner. That was what some people called her. Not Naomi. Just cleaner. And she had learned not to expect anything different. Naomi had discovered long ago that silence was sometimes easier than trying to prove herself to people who had already decided who she was. She kept her head down. She worked hard. She went home. That was the life she chose. But what nobody at Silver Cove knew was that Naomi Brooks had not always lived in the shadows. Before the uniform. Before the cleaning cart. Before she became someone people looked through instead of looked at, she had spent years helping others. Naomi understood emergencies. She understood fear. She understood the fragile moment between losing hope and finding a reason to fight. But after a painful chapter in her life changed everything, she walked away from that world. She stopped searching for moments where people needed saving. She chose a quiet life. A simple life. A life where nobody expected her to be a hero. Until that afternoon. Because destiny had a way of finding people who tried to disappear. A black SUV entered the resort driveway. The atmosphere changed instantly. Employees straightened their posture. Security guards moved into position. Guests lowered their voices. Everyone knew who had arrived. Adrian Kim. A name spoken carefully in powerful circles. A Korean-American businessman whose influence reached far beyond what people could see. Some knew him as a successful investor. Others knew the truth. Adrian Kim was a man with power, connections, and a reputation that made enemies think twice. He was calm. Controlled. Impossible to read. But there was one person who could break through that cold exterior. His son. Lucas Kim. 8 years old. The only family Adrian had left after losing the woman he loved. To the world, Adrian Kim was untouchable. But to Lucas, he was simply a father. A father who would do anything to protect his child. That afternoon, Lucas ran along the shoreline while Adrian watched from a distance. For a brief moment, the powerful man looked different. Not like a leader. Not like someone feared by others. Just a father enjoying a rare peaceful moment with his son. And then everything changed. A scream cut through the beach. People turned toward the ocean. A small figure disappeared beneath the waves. Lucas. Adrian's voice broke through the crowd. The world stopped. Security rushed forward. Guests panicked. Everyone watched. Everyone shouted. But nobody moved fast enough. Except Naomi. The woman everyone had ignored all day dropped the cleaning cloth from her hand. She looked toward the water. She saw a child in danger. And without thinking about her uniform, her past, or the powerful man standing on the shore, she ran. Because in that moment, Lucas Kim was not the son of a mafia boss. He was just a child who needed someone. And Naomi Brooks had never been able to ignore someone who needed help. The ocean swallowed her as she disappeared beneath the waves. And for the first time in years, the woman nobody noticed was about to become the person nobody would ever forget. Everyone believed Naomi Brooks was only a cleaner with a quiet life, but they never knew the woman they ignored had once dedicated herself to saving others. The sound of the ocean disappeared beneath the sound of panic. People crowded along the shoreline, watching the waves move violently around the place where Lucas Kim had vanished. Some screamed for help. Some reached for their phones. Some simply stood frozen. But one person moved before anyone else could react. Naomi Brooks. The same woman who spent every day cleaning the floors of Silver Cove. The same woman whose name most employees never bothered to remember. She was now fighting against the ocean to save the son of the most powerful man at the resort. The waves pushed against her body. The current pulled her deeper. But Naomi kept moving. Because years before she ever wore a cleaner's uniform, she had learned something that never left her. When someone's life depended on you, you did not stop. She finally reached Lucas. The little boy was terrified, struggling to breathe, his small hands desperately searching for something to hold on to. "It's okay," Naomi whispered. Her voice was calm. Steady. The same voice she had used long ago when frightened children needed someone to believe they would be safe. "I'm here." She pulled him closer and carefully guided him through the water. Every second felt longer. Every wave felt stronger. But Naomi refused to let go. On the shore, Adrian Kim watched helplessly. The man who had built an empire through control had never felt so powerless. His security team surrounded him. His employees waited for orders. His influence could move people and businesses across cities. But none of that mattered. Not while his son was still in danger. For the first time in years, Adrian Kim was not a mafia boss. He was only a father. And he was waiting for someone else to save the person he loved most. Then the crowd saw them. Naomi emerged from the water carrying Lucas. A wave of relief moved through everyone watching. She placed Lucas on the sand and immediately began checking on him. She ignored the people staring. Ignored the cameras. Ignored the attention. Her only focus was the child in front of her. "Come on," she whispered. "Stay with me." Moments later, Lucas coughed. A small sound. But to Adrian, it was everything. His son was alive. The tension in his face finally broke. He rushed forward and dropped beside Lucas. "Lucas," the boy slowly opened his eyes. "Dad," Adrian closed his eyes for a brief moment. A moment nobody had ever seen from him. A moment of pure relief. But while everyone focused on the mafia boss and his son, nobody noticed Naomi quietly stepping away. She was exhausted. Her clothes were soaked. Her hands were shaking. But she did not look like someone who wanted praise. She looked like someone who had simply done what was necessary. Adrian noticed. And that was the first thing that confused him. Most people who entered his world wanted something. Money. Protection. Recognition. A connection to power. But Naomi Brooks had saved his son, and was trying to disappear. "Wait." Adrian's voice stopped her. Naomi turned around. For the first time, their eyes truly met. The powerful man everyone feared. And the woman everyone ignored. "You saved my son," Adrian said. Naomi glanced at Lucas. He needed help. That's all. She looked back at him. That's all. Those words stayed with Adrian. Because in his world, nothing was ever that simple. Every favor had a price. Every action had a hidden reason. But Naomi had risked everything without knowing his name. Without knowing his power. Without expecting anything in return. And that bothered him more than he wanted to admit. Because the woman standing in front of him was not what everyone believed. She was not invisible. She was not ordinary. She was someone who had chosen kindness when nobody was watching. And Adrian Kim was about to discover that the quiet cleaner who saved his son carried a story far deeper than anyone imagined. Adrian Kim had spent his entire life learning how to read people, but the one person he could not understand was the woman who saved his son and asked for nothing in return. The hospital hallway was unusually quiet. Outside the large glass windows, the city continued moving as if nothing had happened. Cars passed. People walked through the streets. Businesses opened and closed. But inside that building, Adrian Kim remained still. His eyes stayed fixed on the room where Lucas was sleeping. For hours, he had stood there. Watching his son breathe. Watching the rise and fall of his chest. Because there had been a moment on that beach when Adrian believed he had lost everything. A moment when his money meant nothing. His influence meant nothing. His reputation meant nothing. The only thing that mattered was whether his son would open his eyes again. And if not for Naomi Brooks, he would have been forced to live with that pain forever. Adrian Kim was a man who controlled every detail of his life. Every decision was calculated. Every person around him was carefully observed. Trust was not something he gave easily. In his world, kindness often came with a hidden price. A favor was never just a favor. A smile was rarely just a smile. Everyone wanted something. But Naomi was different. She saved Lucas and walked away. That bothered him. Not because he doubted her. But because he could not understand her. "Sir." Richard Hahn entered the hallway quietly. Adrian did not turn around. "What did you find?" Richard placed a thin folder on the table. "We investigated Naomi Brooks." Adrian finally looked at him. "And?" "She is exactly who she says she is." Richard opened the file. 29 years old. No criminal history. No suspicious connections. She has worked at Silver Cove for almost a year. Adrian looked through the documents. A simple life. A normal background. A woman who seemed to have no connection to his world. But Richard continued. "There is something else." Adrian looked up. She wasn't always a cleaner. The room became silent. Richard placed another photograph on the table. It showed Naomi wearing a different uniform. Standing beside a group of children. Smiling. Confident. She used to work with a child safety organization. Adrian studied the picture carefully. She trained children in emergency response and water safety. The image in his mind changed. The woman who ran into the ocean was not acting by chance. She knew exactly what she was doing. She had experience, Adrian said quietly. "Yes." Richard paused. "But she left that work several years ago." "Why?" Richard hesitated. "Because some answers carried pain. She lost someone." Adrian said nothing. He understood that. Kind of silence. The silence left behind after losing a person who mattered more than anything. Later that evening, Adrian found Naomi sitting alone outside the hospital entrance. She was holding a small cup of coffee she had barely touched. She looked tired. Not physically. Emotionally. "You should be resting," Adrian said. Naomi looked up. "Mr. Kim. You saved my son." She lowered her eyes. "He's safe. That's what matters." Adrian studied her. Most people would have accepted a reward. Naomi gave a small smile. "I didn't save him for a reward." Those words were simple. But they stayed with him. Because Adrian Kim had spent years surrounded by people who measured every action by what they could gain. But Naomi measured hers by something else. Responsibility. Compassion. Humanity. "Why did you do it?" Adrian asked. Naomi looked toward the hospital room. Because he was a child. A pause. That's all. That's all. Adrian looked away. For the first time in a long time, someone had given him an answer he could not challenge. No hidden request. No manipulation. No desire for power. Just kindness. And somehow, that was more difficult for him to understand than any threat. Because Naomi Brooks had entered his world without wanting anything from it. She had saved the person he loved most. And now Adrian Kim needed to know the truth. Who was the woman everyone ignored? And why did someone who had suffered so much still choose to care about others? Adrian Kim had faced enemies who wanted his empire, but he never expected the greatest challenge would be understanding the heart of the woman who saved his son. The morning after the accident, Silver Cove felt different. The same marble floors. The same luxury decorations. The same guests walking through the halls wearing expensive clothes and carrying conversations about wealth and status. But something had changed. People were no longer looking through Naomi Brooks. They were looking at her. The woman who had spent months quietly cleaning the resort was suddenly the person everyone wanted to talk about. Employees whispered in the hallways. Guests asked questions. Security officers exchanged looks. Because everyone knew the story now. The cleaner had saved Adrian Kim's son. But while everyone else saw a miracle, Adrian Kim saw a mystery. He sat inside his private office overlooking the ocean, reviewing the information Richard Hahn had collected. Naomi Brooks. A simple employee record. A quiet life. No hidden connections. No reason to risk everything. And that was exactly what bothered him. Adrian had survived his entire life by understanding people. He knew when someone was lying. He knew when someone was hiding an agenda. He knew when kindness was only a disguise. But Naomi was different. She did not act like someone who had saved the son of one of the most powerful men in the city. She acted like someone who had simply done what was right. A knock interrupted his thoughts. Come in. Richard entered. There is another detail about Naomi. Adrian looked up. What? Richard placed another document on the desk. After leaving the child safety program, she worked several jobs. She never stayed anywhere long. Why? Richard paused. She avoided attention. Adrian looked toward the ocean. A woman who avoided attention. A woman who saved a child in front of hundreds of people. Those two things did not seem to belong together. Later that afternoon, Adrian returned to the beach where everything happened. The waves were calm now. Almost peaceful. It was strange how something so beautiful could become the place where someone nearly lost everything. He found Naomi there. She was picking up her belongings from the employee area. No crowd. No cameras. No attention. Just Naomi. You're leaving, Adrian said. She turned around. Mr. Kim. Her expression was calm. I think it's better this way. Adrian studied her. Why? Naomi looked toward the ocean. Because things are different now. Different how? She smiled slightly. People see me differently. The answer surprised him. Because she was not angry. She was not demanding an apology. She was simply stating a fact. Adrian stepped closer. You deserve to be seen. Naomi looked at him. For a moment, neither spoke. Because those words meant more than he realized. For years, Naomi had been surrounded by people who saw her position before. They saw her. They saw a uniform. They saw a job. They saw someone beneath them. But Adrian was beginning to see something else. A woman who carried pain quietly. A woman who chose kindness even after life had hurt her. A woman who had every reason to become cold, but refused. I need to ask you something, Adrian said. Naomi waited. When you jumped into that water, he paused. You knew you could have died. She nodded. Yes. And you still went. Another quiet moment passed. Naomi looked at the ocean. When you lose someone, you learn something. Adrian listened carefully. You learn that sometimes 1 second is all you get to make a difference. Her words stayed with him. Because Adrian understood regret. He understood living with moments you wished you could change. For the first time, he realized Naomi's courage did not come from fearlessness. It came from pain. From knowing exactly what it felt like to lose someone, and refusing to let another person experience that same loss. That evening, Adrian watched Naomi walk away from Silver Cove. The woman everyone had ignored. The woman who never asked for anything. The woman who had changed everything without even trying. And for the first time in years, Adrian Kim felt something unfamiliar. Not suspicion. Not control. Not obligation. Respect. But he also knew one thing. The story of Naomi Brooks was far from simple. And the more he learned about her, the more he realized the woman who saved his son might be the strongest person he had ever met. Adrian Kim had uncovered many secrets in his life, but the truth about Naomi Brooks was the first one that made him question everything he believed about strength. The old neighborhood was quiet. Nothing about the small apartment building stood out. No luxury cars. No private guards. No signs that someone connected to Adrian Kim's world had ever lived there. But inside one small apartment on the 3rd floor was a story that had been hidden for years. Adrian stood in front of the door, holding a file in his hand. For the first time in a long time, he did not know what he was about to find. He had investigated enemies. He had uncovered betrayals. He had discovered lies from people closest to him. But Naomi Brooks was different. The more he learned about her, the less she looked like someone weak. And the more he realized, the world had never truly seen her. The door opened. Naomi froze when she saw him. Mr. Kim. Adrian looked at her for a moment. I wanted to understand who saved my son. Naomi lowered her eyes. I already told you. I was just there. No, Adrian replied quietly. You were more than that. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Naomi stepped aside and allowed him inside. The apartment was simple. A small kitchen. A modest living room. A few books on a shelf. Nothing expensive. Nothing that showed ambition or wealth. But then Adrian noticed the wall. Photographs covered it. A collection of memories. A life that existed before the woman standing in front of him became invisible. His eyes stopped on one picture. A little girl smiling beside the ocean. Naomi noticed. Her expression changed. That was Lily. Adrian said nothing. He already knew the name. But hearing it from Naomi made the story feel different. She was my daughter. The room became silent. She was 8 years old. Naomi walked closer to the photograph. She loved the water. She used to tell me she would swim across the ocean one day. A small smile appeared on her face. A smile filled with love. And pain. She was fearless. Adrian watched her carefully. Because he understood that kind of love. The kind that never leaves. What happened? He asked. Naomi took a slow breath. There was a flood during a community event. Her fingers touched the edge of the picture. I was trained to help people. I knew what to do. She paused. I saved several children. Adrian already knew where the story was going. But not everyone. The silence that followed was heavier than any words. Naomi looked away. I spent years asking myself what I could have done differently. Adrian understood. Because guilt was something he carried too. Different memories. Different losses. But the same invisible weight. You stopped working in rescue after that, Adrian said. Naomi nodded. I couldn't face it anymore. The water. She looked toward the window. The memories. Adrian remained quiet. Because suddenly, the woman he thought he understood became someone completely different. She was not fearless. She was not someone who felt no pain. She was someone who knew exactly what pain felt like, and still chose to help another person. Then why did you jump for Lucas? Adrian asked. Naomi looked at him. For a moment, her eyes reflected everything she had carried alone. Because I heard a child calling for help. She paused. And I couldn't ignore him. Simple. Honest. Powerful. Adrian looked down. In his world, people protected themselves first. They calculated risks. They measured rewards. But Naomi had done the opposite. She had seen danger. She had remembered her own pain. And she still moved forward. Later that evening, Adrian returned home. Lucas was sitting at the table drawing. When Adrian approached, the boy turned the paper around. It was a picture of the beach. The ocean. A bright sun. And 3 people standing together. Adrian looked carefully. Who are they? Lucas smiled. That's me. He pointed. That's you. Then he pointed at the 3rd figure. That's Naomi. Adrian said nothing. Because for the first time, he understood something. Naomi Brooks had not just saved his son's life. She had brought warmth back into a family that had forgotten what hope felt like. And the woman everyone ignored, was slowly becoming the one person Adrian Kim could never overlook. Adrian Kim had spent his life protecting his empire from enemies, but he never expected the person he needed to protect most would be the woman everyone once ignored. The days after the accident changed everything at Silver Cove. The same employees who once walked past Naomi Brooks without a second glance now watched her carefully. The same people who never asked her name now whispered it. Naomi. The woman who saved Lucas Kim. But attention was something Naomi never wanted. She did not enjoy being surrounded by questions. She did not want cameras following her. She did not want people suddenly treating her differently because of who she had saved. Because deep down, Naomi knew something. People were not seeing her. They were seeing what she had done. And those were not the same thing. Adrian noticed. While everyone else focused on the rescue, he focused on Naomi herself. He saw how she avoided praise. How she stepped away whenever people tried to celebrate her. How she continued helping others even when nobody was watching. That was what made her different. And that was why he could not ignore her anymore. One afternoon, Adrian returned to Silver Cove. Not as the powerful owner. Not as the man everyone feared. But as the father of the child Naomi saved. He entered the employee hallway where Naomi was organizing supplies. The moment she saw him, she stopped. Mr. Kim. Adrian looked around the small room. A place where employees rarely received attention. A place where Naomi had spent months working quietly. I heard you are leaving, he said. Naomi looked down. I think it's better. Why? She paused. Because people are treating me differently now. Adrian studied her expression. You don't like that? No, her answer was honest. I don't want people to respect me because of your name. The word surprised him. Because most people would have wanted exactly that. The protection. The connection. The opportunity. But Naomi wanted something else. She wanted to be valued for who she was. Not for the person she had saved. You think I don't understand? Adrian asked. Naomi looked at him. He continued. My entire life, people have treated me differently because of my name. For a moment, the cold businessman disappeared. She saw the man underneath. The father. The person carrying his own burden. But there is a difference, Naomi said quietly. What? You chose your power. A pause. I never chose to be invisible. Those words stayed with Adrian. Because they revealed something he had never considered. He had spent years surrounded by people who wanted to be seen. But Naomi had spent years simply wanting to be recognized as human. Later that evening, Adrian asked Richard to look deeper into the situation at Silver Cove. Not because he suspected Naomi. Because he wanted to understand the people who had ignored her. The investigation revealed something uncomfortable. Several employees had dismissed Naomi. 4 months. They judged her because of her position. They assumed she had nothing valuable to offer. They never asked about her past. Never asked about her skills. Never asked about the person behind the uniform. Adrian read the report silently. The anger he felt was not explosive. It was controlled. The same quiet anger that made people fear him. But this time, it was not about revenge. It was about justice. The next day, Adrian called a meeting with the resort staff. Everyone gathered in the main conference room. Managers. Employees. Executives. All waiting. Adrian stood at the front. And beside him stood Naomi. The woman they once ignored. The room became silent. Maya saved my son, someone whispered. Adrian looked across the room. No, his voice was calm. But that is not why she deserves respect. Everyone listened. She deserves respect because she was already worthy of it before that moment. Nobody spoke. Because the truth was impossible to deny. Naomi had not become valuable when she saved Lucas. She had always been valuable. The world simply refused to see it. And that day, for the first time at Silver Cove, the woman who cleaned the floors stood in a room where everyone finally looked at her. Everyone thought Naomi Brooks was finally being recognized, but they did not realize that the woman they once ignored was about to face the hardest test of all. After Adrian Kim's announcement, Silver Cove changed. The whispers were different. The looks were different. People who once walked past Naomi without noticing her now greeted her by name. But respect was not something that appeared overnight. Not everyone accepted the truth. Some people still believed Naomi's place had not changed. Especially Victoria Reynolds. The resort manager had spent years believing that positions defined people. To her, employees belonged in categories. Executives belonged above. Workers belonged below. And Naomi had always been placed at the bottom. 1 week after Adrian's meeting, Victoria gathered several senior employees inside the resort office. She was lucky, Victoria said. The room became quiet. She was in the right place at the right time. Nobody responded. Because everyone knew Adrian Kim had already made his position clear. But Victoria continued. Saving a child does not suddenly make someone qualified for everything. Those words reached Adrian. And when he heard them, something changed. Not anger. Not revenge. Something deeper. Disappointment. Because he knew those words were not about Naomi. They were about every person who had ever been judged before being understood. That afternoon, Adrian returned to Silver Cove. The atmosphere changed the moment he entered. Employees stood straighter. Conversations stopped. Everyone knew why he was there. But this time, Adrian was not there as the owner. He was there because someone needed to hear the truth. Inside the conference room, Victoria stood with several managers. Naomi was there too. Quiet. Calm. Still the same person she had always been. Adrian looked around the room. Then he spoke. I heard someone say Naomi Brooks was lucky. Nobody moved. She was lucky that she was there. A pause. She was lucky that she knew what to do. Another pause. Adrian looked directly at Victoria. But nobody asks why she was willing to risk her own life. The room became silent. Because that was the difference. Everyone saw the result. Nobody saw the courage behind it. Nobody saw the fear she had overcome. Nobody saw the pain she carried. She did not become valuable when she saved my son, Adrian continued. She was valuable before anyone knew her name. Naomi looked down. Because she was not used to hearing those words. Not from powerful people. Not from anyone. For years, she had accepted being overlooked. She had convinced herself that being invisible was easier. Safer. But standing there, hearing Adrian defend her, she realized something. Her silence had protected her from judgment. But it had also allowed people to forget her humanity. After the meeting ended, Naomi walked outside toward the beach. The same beach where everything began. Adrian followed. You didn't have to do that, she said. Yes, I did. Naomi looked at him. Why? Adrian watched the waves. Because someone should have done it before. Those words surprised her. Because behind the powerful image of Adrian Kim was a man who understood what it meant to be judged by the world. A man who had spent his life building walls. A man who was slowly learning how to break them. You know, Naomi said softly, people are going to talk. They already do. A small smile appeared on Adrian's face. For the first time, Naomi saw something different. Not the feared Mafia boss. Not the powerful businessman. Just Adrian. A father. A person. Someone who had changed because another person showed him kindness. And that was the moment Naomi understood. She had saved Lucas's life. But somehow, she had also saved something inside Adrian Kim that had been lost for years. The world had finally started seeing Naomi Brooks. But Adrian knew the truth. She had never been invisible. People had simply refused to look. For years, Adrian Kim built his reputation by making people fear him, but the day he stood beside Naomi Brooks, the world saw a different kind of power. The news spread quickly. Not about Adrian Kim's business deals. Not about his influence. Not about the empire he had spent years building. This time, people were talking about the woman beside him. Naomi Brooks. The cleaner who had saved his son. The woman who had once walked through Silver Cove unnoticed was now the person everyone wanted to understand. But while the public saw a beautiful story, Adrian saw something deeper. He saw a person who still carried the weight of everything she had lost. And he knew one thing. A person like Naomi did not need to be rescued. She needed someone to remind the world that she was never powerless. Weeks passed after the accident. Adrian began working with Naomi on a new project. Not a reward. Not a payment. A purpose. Together, they created a child safety initiative connected to Silver Cove, designed to teach emergency awareness and water safety to families in the community. For Naomi, it was more than a program. It was a second chance. A chance to return to the work she once loved. A chance to honor the daughter she lost. On the opening day, hundreds of people gathered near the beach. Children laughed. Parents watched carefully. And for the first time in years, Naomi stood in front of a crowd without trying to disappear. She looked different. Not because she had changed. Because people finally saw what had always been there. Strength. Compassion. Dignity. Adrian watched from a distance. The same man who once stood behind layers of security now stood among ordinary people. Richard Hahn noticed the change. You're different, Richard said. Adrian looked toward Naomi. Am I? Richard nodded. You used to believe everyone had a reason for getting close to you. Adrian remained silent. Because it was true. His entire life had taught him to be careful. Trust could become a weakness. Kindness could become a trap. But Naomi had shown him something he never expected. Not everyone wanted something from him. Some people simply wanted to help. Across the beach, Lucas ran toward Naomi holding a drawing. Look. She smiled. What did you make? The boy held up the paper. It showed the ocean. A bright sun. And 3 people standing together. Naomi looked at it carefully. You drew us. Lucas nodded. Because you're part of our family now. For a moment, Naomi said nothing. The word family carried a weight she understood better than anyone. Adrian watched her expression change. Not sadness. Not pain. Something warmer. Something she thought she had lost forever. Later that evening, Adrian and Naomi stood near the shoreline. The sunset reflected across the water. The same place where their lives had changed. I used to think power meant controlling everything, Adrian said. Naomi looked at him. And now? He watched the waves. Now I think power is what you do with what you have. A quiet moment passed. You had nothing to gain that day, he continued. You could have walked away. Naomi smiled softly. But I didn't. No, Adrian looked at her. That's what changed everything. The woman everyone ignored had changed the way a powerful man saw the world. Not through money. Not through influence. Not through fear. Through one simple choice. To care. But not everyone was happy about Adrian's transformation. There were still people who believed Naomi did not belong beside him. People who believed someone like her should remain invisible. And soon, they would make sure the world remembered why they had underestimated her. Because the greatest challenges do not always come from enemies you can see. Sometimes they come from people who refuse to believe someone else deserves to rise. The world once saw Naomi Brooks as a woman who cleaned up other people's messes, but in the end, they learned she was the person who helped everyone find what truly mattered. 1 year later, Silver Cove looked different. The same ocean stretched across the horizon. The same waves touched the shore. The same luxury resort welcomed powerful people from around the world. But something had changed. The way people looked at each other. The way people listened. The way they understood the value of someone standing quietly in the background. At the center of that change was Naomi Brooks. She no longer carried a cleaning cart through the halls. She no longer walked past conversations that stopped when she entered a room. She no longer wondered if anyone noticed her. Because now, people knew her name. Not because of Adrian Kim. Not because of his influence. But because of the person she had always been. A woman who chose kindness when nobody was watching. The child safety program she helped create had grown beyond Silver Cove. Families from different communities had joined. Children learned how to stay safe around water. Parents learned emergency skills. And every time Naomi stood in front of a group of children, she remembered Lily. The daughter she lost. The reason she once believed her heart could never heal. But now, instead of only remembering the pain, she remembered the love. From a distance, Adrian watched Naomi teach a group of children near the beach. The powerful man who once lived behind walls now stood comfortably among ordinary people. Richard Hahn approached him. You know, years ago, nobody would have believed this. Adrian looked toward Naomi. What? That Adrian Kim would spend his time helping a community program instead of expanding his empire. A small smile appeared on Adrian's face. People change. Richard nodded. Because of her. Adrian remained silent for a moment. Then he answered honestly. Yes. Because Naomi had shown him something he never learned from power. Fear could make people obey. Money could make people listen. But kindness could make people remember. Later that evening, Adrian and Naomi stood near the ocean. The sunset painted the sky with shades of orange and gold. The same place where everything had started. The same place where one person had risked everything for another. You know, Naomi said softly, when I first started working here, nobody knew my name. Adrian looked at her. I know. I thought that was easier. A pause. Being invisible. The waves moved quietly beside them. But then I realized something. What? Naomi looked toward the beach. Being unseen does not mean you have less value. Adrian listened carefully. Because those words were something he needed to hear too. For years, he believed his worth came from his power. His influence. The fear he created. But Naomi taught him that a person's greatest impact was not measured by how many people feared them. It was measured by how many lives became better because they existed. A few moments later, Lucas ran toward them. Dad. Adrian smiled. The same boy who once brought fear into his heart now brought joy into his life. Lucas held Naomi's hand. Are you coming tomorrow? Naomi smiled. Of course. Adrian watched them together. And he realized something. The woman who saved his son had done more than change one moment. She had changed an entire family. She had changed him. Years ago, people ignored Naomi Brooks because they saw only her uniform. They saw her job. They saw what they thought she was worth. But they never saw her courage. Her compassion. Her strength. And that was their mistake. Because sometimes the quietest person in the room carries the greatest power. Sometimes the person standing in the shadows is the one who brings the light. And that day, the world remembered something Adrian Kim would never forget: a person's dignity is never decided by where they stand, but by the kindness they choose to give when the world is not looking.